And so it's just a really great thing. It can come also in a lot of different consistencies and feelings. So this is a really classic silicone dildo. It's called dual density dildo because the outside actually has a little bit more give and softness than the core, the inside. This can be a really great one for people who are beginning, not necessarily the size, but this kind of squishability. It can be great for people who are just starting out, particularly people who are just starting out with anal sex because it's a little softer. And oftentimes really hard dildos don't feel as good to many people in terms of like wanting to be able to squeeze against something. This kind of feels more realistic, okay? And at the same time, I can pass these around. You can also feel them come up here later. There's also like more, you can have more rigid, more firm kinds of silicone, and that can be pleasurable for some people just if they like that feeling of just real strength behind them, okay? Silicone is great because you can clean it really easily. You can boil it, you can put it in the dishwasher, which is hilarious when you have house guests. And so it's great to be able to clean dildos that way. There are other kinds of materials for dildos. There are wooden dildos, there are Pyrex dildos, there are jelly rubber dildos. The one big drawback to silicone is that it is more expensive than other kinds of materials. Now it's coming, the prices are coming down all the time, which is great, but you know, a good silicone dildo can set you back between like $40 to $110, right? It's no joke, but at the same time, if you take good care of it, it's like investing in a good pair of work boots, you know? It's like, they'll get you where you need to go. So again, you've got a lot of different things. We're gonna end before the store closes, so feel free to like wander around, pick up things, feel what feels good to you. But yeah, so that's the thing about materials. Jelly rubber is kind of on the far end of the materials where it's really, really cheap. But there's also the science is kind of out as to whether or not it's good or bad for one's body. The idea is that they kind of off-gas like a lot of cheaper plastics do. So some people, especially like some people who are very sensitive to chemicals, say like avoid jelly rubber at all costs. Personally, you know, if you find a dildo that you like, that looks good to you, that is made of jelly rubber, I will not tell you to not buy it. I will generally say use a condom with it because you can't boil them because they will melt into a pile of goo if you try and boil them, so they're not easy to clean. But because they're so cheap, if you just want to explore and you're just trying to get into this for the first time, it might be your choice to like buy a $10 dildo, explore it, and then once you decide you found a shape that you like, upgrade to the good kind. So that's my own personal take on it. Everybody's going to have a different opinion. Some people would be like, never ever. Some people are like, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Your mileage may vary. It's your body. You can make choices for yourself. So I trust you to be able to do that. I have seen people strap on with Pyrex or wood. It's hard. Pyrex is a form of glass. But for people who like really intense stimulation, that can be perfectly fun for people. But most of the time, the dildos that you'll see that are designed for strap-ons are a little bit, or made of silicone, or are generally squishable. Does that make sense? All right. So in terms of material, now let's talk about shape. So like I said, it depends on what kind of stimulation you want. What I like to think about is like, how am I going to be using this most often? Am I going to be strapping it on with my partner in their butt? Am I going to be strapping it on with my partner in their vagina? Is it a little bit of both? And that's when you can start thinking about like, okay, what kind of size and shape do I want? Now, for a long time, a lot of times, you know, I don't want to say that necessarily. Some people really don't like bringing things that look like dicks into their bedroom. So you can totally get a totally awesome dildo that looks very little like a penis. You can also get a totally awesome dildo that looks a whole lot like a penis. The realisticness is actually, there's a really cool wide range. I have a dildo that looks like a tentacle, because I'm sometimes into that kind of thing. Don't judge me. But I also have dildos that look like I would have, like what my dick would look like if I had a dick, right? Because sometimes I want to look down and be like, that's my dick. But sometimes I want to look down and be like, that's my tentacle. So your choice is your own. Generally, as a general rule, if you're going to buy a strap-on, like a dildo and harness with a partner that you're going to be using with the regular, Generally speaking, I like to have a little bit more conference around like what kind of dildo you want, because sometimes people don't want to see a penis going into their body, right? Or sometimes people really don't want to see a tentacle going into their body. Again, you have the right to have preferences. So in terms of that, I think that it can be nice to kind of have a conversation about what looks good. But at the same time, in terms of size, I generally say the person who's going to be receiving the dildo gets the final vote in how big it should be, right? just as a rule of thumb. There are also, again, there are like a ton of, there was a time when there were like 4 different kinds of dildos to choose from, and they're all like veiny and scary. Not to say veiny and scary are the same thing, but sometimes they're a little intense. But there are like a ton of different adorable different kinds of dildo shapes. I love this kind. There's some that look like knee socks. They have like the little colors. It's like the American Apparel knee socks. They're the cutest. So yeah, you know, browse around and see what excites you. If you're the kind of person who's like really likes to look down and see what feels like a phallus, like a real phallus, like there's options for that. Like even now we've got like cool paint jobs, right? Like you can have like the multiple colors. So that's totally legit, totally great. Again, if you get really into strap-on sex, you're gonna at some point amass a variety, and that's really fun. When I'm playing with a new partner, I like to just lay out my collection. Choose whatever you'd like. So yeah, that's an option as well. Okay.
When you said that, yeah. Is that for use on them or use on you?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, generally speaking, I mean, if I'm negotiating sex with a new partner, we'll both be like, well, this looks fun. Well, that looks fun. This and that looks like fun, and you can come up with, you know, what feels good for both of you. But generally speaking, if I'm strapping it on and my partner is like, I would like to get fucked, I like to like give them options of like how they would like to get fucked.
So in that, you mean you are using like the same toy for multiple people?
Oh, I mean, I have toys that I do use for multiple people. Of course, that they're all silicone, so I can boil them in between. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, and again, like for people who know their bodies, and I encourage people to get to know their bodies, so that you know what you like. Just very simply, you can be like, oh, like I'm really into G-spot stimulation. That's my thing. Then you can be like, do you have anything with a prominent curve? Right? Or people who are like, I like butt sex, but I actually can't take too much girth. Well, then great. Like, let's find something long and narrow that we can play with together. Does that make sense? For beginners, generally speaking, smooth is really good. And generally speaking, for beginners with anal sex particularly, smooth is really good. A lot of ridges can feel like a lot for people. Also, for beginners, generally speaking, narrower is better. You can always grade up. I'm the same way with dildos like I am at buffets, where it's just like my eyes are bigger than my orifices, right? So I'll be like, oh baby, I love this one, and then my vagina's like, oh no. So be aware that that's a thing that can happen. If you are somebody who's exploring anal sex for the first time, start narrow. You can always grade up. I mean, we are in West Hollywood. There are so many ways to grow. It's easier to start small and work your way up. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, so again, knowing sometimes people like prominent curves. Prominent curves can be great for people who like G-spot play, also for people who like prostate play. It can feel really good. Sometimes people don't like that kind of play. They don't like G-spot. They don't like prostate, so then you'd want to look for something a little bit straighter so that you're not actually grabbing onto anything. And then also, actually, this is a good example too, when you're looking at not even realism, but actually the shape of the actual dildo itself, some, even if they're not realistic, will have this corona, this prominent corona, right? That prominent corona will catch in a really sexy way to some people the G-spot or the prostate, but for people who don't like prostate or G-spot play, that can be an uncomfortable feeling. Right? So getting to know, and again, maybe starting with smooth, and then adding more elements as you go. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Again, I know I'm moving real fast. No? Okay. So we talked about realism, we talked about material, shape. Okay. All right, size. Okay, so yeah, general rule of thumb, long and thin's good for anuses, shorter and girthier is good for vaginas. Again, your mileage may vary. Let's see here. Oh, but another thing, if you're just getting used to wielding a strap-on, wielding a dildo, the hardest thing about strap-on sex, in my opinion, is the lack of biofeedback. Right? Like if you have a penis that you like to use for sex, you generally know where it is at all times, right? But for me, if I'm having sex with somebody and I don't know where the end of my dildo is, it can be really hard to figure out. So if you're just getting started, going for a little bit of length will be nice, because when you thrust out, that's usually when you lose the dildo, or the dildo loses the orifice and you don't notice, which can be a really frustrating thing. Sometimes it can be a painful thing where you try and ram back in, and then you're like, oh, I hit you in the taint real hard. So sorry. So yeah, those are that. Any questions? Okay, so I'm going to move to harnesses. Or talk about putting them together. All right, so let's say you've chosen your dildo, you're super excited about it. Now you want to find the harness that works for it. Now, and you can choose your harness first and then choose a dildo that works for it. It's totally up to you. But there are a couple things to know when you're choosing a harness. So there are a couple different varieties of harnesses, which is awesome. Again,